I'm better with writing than with speaking, but... Inequity has formed 4 distinct factions within a society: those who are dominant and empowered, those who are dominant and marginalized, or disenfranchised. For the purposes of this video, marginalized and disenfranchised are going to be used semi-interchangeably. There are going to be those who are dominant and empowered, those who are dominant and marginalized, those who are non-dominant and empowered, and those who are non-dominant and disenfranchised. And before I go any further, I should break down what these terms mean: dominant versus non-dominant, and empowered versus disenfranchised. It means how, like, what your place in society. Is there a lot of you? Like, is there, that's what I would say with dominance, because basically with abundance, or say maybe plethora, comes power. And then disenfranchised means, is something about you making some of your power being, is it taking away, or is something about you making people see you as less than who you are? That is what being disenfranchised is. So through that, you can kind of come up with 4 subsets of people you might see in a society. Dominant and empowered would be a straight white man. Non-dominant and empowered would be an Asian woman. Disenfranchised and non-dominant would be a queer black woman, and dominant yet disenfranchised would be a, say, white woman or white man who is homosexual, or perhaps low income. An empowered person may be a straight white man, like on his face. He's dominant because of his race and empowered because of his sexuality and his, how would you say? Yeah, just like his personhood. He is dominant and he is empowered. A non-dominant yet empowered person may be an Asian woman because she is non-dominant in society due to both her gender and her, due to both her gender and her race. However, she is empowered because of the positive stereotypes of Asian American, or of Asian women in predominantly white society. Specifically, when you look to apartheid in South Africa, Asians of certain countries were considered honorary white. So therefore, I would say, it's just in my example, that an Asian woman may be a great example of someone who is non-dominant yet empowered in, like, certain cases. Non-dominant and disenfranchised might be a, say, African-American woman who is also, like, maybe homosexual. So basically this person is non-dominant because of her race, and then also disenfranchised because of her sexuality and her gender. Called Americana, which came out, I believe, in like 2012, which tells the story of a dominant and empowered woman who becomes non-dominant and disenfranchised when she moves to the United States. Now, how does this happen? She moved from West Africa to the United States. So basically, these terms, dominant, non-dominant, disenfranchised, non-disenfranchised, they're not fixed. They can, like, basically move as soon as you choose to move, or as soon as you choose, or as soon as society chooses that something is okay or isn't okay. The treatment of those apart from the dominant group within a society has led to the disenfranchisement and marginalization of said non-dominant groups for millennia. The question remains, how can such change be implemented? And I will say fiction can actually change things. In the United States, we privilege science, math, and a lot of hard sciences over soft skills. Aristotle stated that it's the poet's job to convey what may happen, and thus poetry, or fiction, is raised above history, for it gives the listener the ability to contemplate all events, both personal and interpersonal, both profound and paradoxical. Paradoxical because it is, by definition, fiction, and thus supposed to be taken as an element of someone's imagination. History, science, they're not perfect either. And again, of course, if I'm going to say, just to put it out there, history is written by the winners, so you can't necessarily take history on its face. Now, the reason fiction is so important is because science, though it's been touted as indisputable and undeniable, it's also historically been proven to be problematic, such as phrenology, which is the debunked science, or the debunked study of studying a human skull to determine whether the person is intelligent or not. That so-called science was used as justification for how African Americans were treated as enslaved people in the United States. DSM, which is a psychological handbook for disorders, classified homosexuality as a mental, as a treatable mental treatable mental illness. which is crazy. I can't even get it out. Conversely, it does not have gatekeepers. It does not pretend to be real. Fiction says what could happen, and therefore it lowers your guard and it imagines people, or it lets people imagine what could be. They put themselves in another's shoes, and although it's fiction, it honestly opens a part of your mind that says, this could happen, this could be me. Have been used to teach audiences since before the biblical era. Homer's The Iliad was a fictional story that taught young Greek boys how to be men. Dominant and empowered class cannot control these forms as they can with science or history. Entertainment and art are free from academic or financial barriers, kind of, because non-dominant and disenfranchised people have a chance to tell their own stories and to be heard. Basically, YouTube is free, Medium is free. Yes, it's not necessarily easy to get a following or a lot of impact on these sites, but there is no one pushing up against you saying that you can't, or like your word isn't valid, or that you shouldn't be posting up against this, unless of course you're trying to incite hate speech. The parasocial contact hypothesis and the theory of mind, you're going to have an argument for why fiction is actually incredibly effective for improving the mindset of disenfranchised, marginalized people. So parasocial contact theory in a nutshell is saying that, say you watch the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you're going to feel like you know Will, like you know this character, even though you know nothing about it, it's not real, it's a fictional character. Therefore, if you see yourself in Will, or you see Will and say a person you know, you're less likely to be afraid of them, or you're going to feel more kinship to them because you're going to think, oh, this person is just like so-and-so. So again, that can be really problematic, say with a lot of negative stereotypes you might see on TV, especially with non-dominant, disenfranchised people. However, when you see someone like Claire Huxtable on television, then through to the parasocial contact theory, you're going to have a more positive idea of what Black women are and what Black women can be, just because you saw a positive image of a Black woman on television. Yeah, parasocial contact is similar to interpersonal interaction. Even if you don't end up empathizing with someone, it's the ability to see where they're coming from mentally, although you may not know them. Movies like Hearts and Dixie and Hallelujah, produced in 1929, showed African Americans in a positive light and honestly helped combat the negative stereotypes from movies such as Birth of a Nation. So, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Black people are seeing themselves positively depicted on the screen. They're supporting these films, and then this money is getting funneled back into the community, because now that more of these films are being made, more African American and disenfranchised people are able to get more work because of them. Forest, basically, there were blaxploitation films, and there were plenty of films in forms of fiction that negatively, or maybe even if it was intended to be positive, had negative effects on the African American community. But that's why I'm saying that people in power, like those fictional creators, have to be aware of the power they have. I don't think that, say, I as a Black woman, or maybe my friend as an Asian woman, or so on and so forth, I don't think we should be forced to create stories with only positive depictions of our community, because that's unrealistic and honestly unhelpful, because Black people shouldn't have to be wholly positive and wholly perfect in order to have respect and the ability to self-actualize. Good to know the power that you have. Showcasing a complexity of experience as well as an in-depth humanization of people who fall outside of a heteronormative context. Certain works of fiction have the power to validate the queer community and provide an avenue for the dominant and empowered portion of society to empathize with them. And if you're thinking of things you can do as a Black person, don't feel bad if you, like, say, want to get creative and make TikToks or make YouTube videos or whatever. That's a great way to be an activist. If you are white or want to get, or otherwise an ally to any community that's disenfranchised, then create them, like create with them, make stories with them. When you create, especially if you're a writer, if you're, say, a white author, speak to your experience, and if, say, you don't know many people outside of your own experience, maybe write why, or do research and explain why. Maybe have a character or two that you feel is representative of this. But I also say be very careful with this. Don't necessarily just rely on stereotypes, and also don't think that as a dominant person it is your job to tell the story of the non-dominant community, because then you have books like American Dirt and shit just kind of hits the fan. Also don't think that as a dominant person, it is your job to tell the story of the non-dominant community. I'm kind of forced, so hopefully this was helpful to someone. I don't know.